All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this COB Smart webinar. My name is Maggie, and I'm a member of the CAQH marketing team, and I will be running logistics for today's webinar. So before we get started today, I just want to review a couple housekeeping details for all those listening in. Today's session is being recorded, and you will receive a link via email to the on-demand webinar that you may share with others. Your phones will be muted throughout the webinar today. All questions should be submitted online. You may ask your question at any time throughout the session. Just simply type your question into the right side of the GoToWebinar panel. We will address your questions throughout the presentation and at the end of today's presentation as well. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to Michelle, who will introduce our speakers.
All right, thank you so much, Maggie. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the call. I'm Michelle Toscano. I'm part of the CAQH Business Development Team. Today, we are so pleased to have Carrie Levesque from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island to join us and present her experience in ROI with COB Smart. Carrie and I have known each other and worked together for many years. We really appreciate her bringing, not only her story on how she won management and budget approval to adopt COB Smart, but really delivering the outcomes. Understanding how she was able to deliver on her forecasted savings and improved member experience. Next slide, please. So we have a great audience on the call. We have new health plans and state organizations that are looking to evaluate the solution for adoption. We also have existing clients who really find value in understanding how other plans are using COB Smart data. So we're going to touch a little bit about CAQH and do a COB Smart solution overview for the folks who may be new. And we are going to touch on some new enhancements for our existing clients so they are sure to take advantage of the full value of COB Smart. Next slide. So CAQH, we are unique in the healthcare IT space. We are a nonprofit. We are funded by 13 health plans and 2 trade associations. We work together to create low-cost automated utilities that standardize data, standardize process, so we could drive those efficiencies throughout the industry. COB Smart is a national solution, and it, like all CAQH solutions, it has to benefit the health plans, the members, and the providers, so we can achieve our mission as a nonprofit organization. So when we started looking at COB Smart, or COB in general, and looking on how to solution it, we found it costs the industry about $800 million annually. So when we looked at the claim payment life cycle, we felt that if we could create a solution that would bring COB solutioning to the beginning of the process around when you first look at patient access and eligibility, we would really be able to cost avoid COB administrative costs downstream. So we moved up, you can go to the next slide, please. So we moved up that solutioning up early in the claims process. And what we did is created a COB Smart database. So today, COB Smart is a database with about 180 million members, or more than half of the US population. Health plans deliver data to us each week. Their full membership, including commercial group, Medicaid, Medicare Advantage, commercial, individual. We also collect other types of benefit information, including Medicare supplemental, Medicare Part D, vision, dental, and behavioral health. With this really rich source of weekly health plan data, we are looking at new use cases. We look forward to launching a pharmacy solution later in 2021. We're targeting the spring, but really the value of the data that we bring in, the amount of health plans that we work with, we are going to continue to improve the solution, the quality of data, and continually build new use cases for COB Smart. Next slide, please. So it's a high-level solution overview. This is how COB Smart works. Starting over on the left-hand side at number 1, health plans submit each week their full membership eligibility and enrollment data. They submit that to the COB Smart database. COB Smart takes that membership and matches it, your membership, across 180 million members to identify net new COB overlaps. Then we take those overlaps and do a primacy determination based on NAIC rules. We take the medical to medical overlaps and do a 270, 271 transaction, so we can be completely clear whether that member is active not only in your system, but the other health plan system. And then we deliver this validated COB overlap to you, which has a 99.5% accuracy rate. So you can update your claim system even before claims are processed. So you have the data that you need to make sure that your claims payment accuracy is enhanced and improved, and it's based on the most important, most accurate COB data that we can deliver. Next slide, please. So we deliver this data back to you via file exchange every Monday morning. We also deliver it back to you with a portal. So your analyst will sit down every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and have net new COB overlaps to work. COB Smart is a program. We do this every Monday, 52 times a year, to give you the highest chance of being able to recover and pay your claims correctly. There's tremendous efficiencies in using the COB Smart portal, including member searches, being able to manipulate the data for overrides. You can upload documents, make inquiries to other health plans. I'm not going to read through all of this, but there's tremendous efficiencies within the portal. You're now working with other health plans using the same COB Smart data for faster resolution and the highest efficiency, also with the most transparency that we can afford. In addition, we have a support and reporting model around this. You will be working with a CAQH account manager to review your dashboard every month. The dashboard is very transparent, including the number of members you have on the system, how many are primary, how many are secondary, how many we could determine COB Smart on, and how many are determined COB overlaps. Next slide, please. I did put this one slide up. We have just launched an enhancement to our portal called Workflow. This was launched at the end of July, and we are getting rave reviews about it. If you're an existing client and you haven't been trained on the workflow enhancement, please give us a call. We would love to pull you in and really get you started on this. If you are a new organization reviewing or evaluating COB Smart, think about this as replacing that plan-to-plan communication. You're able now to get onto the portal and send multiple inquiries out to multiple plans. There's tracking. There's an incident management workflow to this where folks have to respond within a few days. It's significantly improved the process of COB resolution and certainly the speed on on resolution. You can go to the next slide. So just to do a quick recap, what the solution does is we aggregate and centralize COB data in one database. We take that data and we match it to identify net new COB overlaps each week. We use NAIC rules to determine primacy. We validate those medical to medical overlaps so we can deliver you 99.5% accurate data. Data accuracy fuels automation. And we are all about, an automated solution and reducing manual process to reduce costs. And then the access now is you will get a file each week via SFTP. And then of course the portal is updated for you. So again, your analysts can start working, those overlaps immediately. Certainly in this age of remote working, you're able to track your analysts, across the board on what they're working on, what their resolution is. CAQH, now you're able to go directly to other health plans. CAQH is not the judge, but we are the referee between health plans, and we will work with you, to make sure that you're getting the data back and forth that you need. Next slide. So typically here I would bring up, our return on investment and how plans see value, but Carrie is going to be bringing that in her presentation. What I just want to talk about really briefly is adoption. Today, again, we have over 45 health plans for over 180 million members. Over 34 states have over 50% adoption, which means that 50% of the insured members in that state are already in the COB Smart database. So the value here is really the beginning of your business case. We are all about adoption and plans, and Carrie will bring this up. Our clients support not only each other, but new plans evaluating the solution. The more plans that adopt the solution, the more members in the database improves their value. New plans. Can somebody go on mute?
It looks like we're getting some audio from JJ. If you don't mind muting, thank you.
Okay. So the thing is that as new plans come on, if you are a COB Smart client, you can actually increase your forecasted savings based on the plan that adopts and the number of members they're bringing. It's constantly we're constantly improving this solution, and we're constantly improving the data value. Next slide, please. And this is just to let folks know if they are evaluating the solution and they're new to COB Smart, we can actually bring to you a good look of the number of members that are in your service area and the other health plans that we see that you'll have most overlaps with. This is like really the start of the foundation of your business case. And again, if that's something that interests you, please reach out to us and we're happy to bring that to the table. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Carrie. I just want to take a pause to see if we have any questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Carrie Levesque and I work at Blue Cross of Rhode Island. I'm in the claims operations team. The way that COB falls in our organization is it's managed by the claims operations team. It's gone back and forth over the years under membership, under claims, but we have responsibility for both identifying COB information, updating in the system, as well as overseeing the processing of the coordination benefit claims. I've been working in the COB space since about 2010. At the beginning, I got introduced to COB doing a Lean Six Sigma flat belt project. So I spent about a year and a half. There were a lot of opportunities in the COB program at that time. Spent a year and a half in that area. We improved a lot of things, but there was so much left that when an opportunity presented itself 2 years later, I took the role in overseeing coordination of benefits. The last year or so, I've had more of a consultative role in that team as I've taken on responsibilities in the Medicare world. So today I'd like to give you an overview of our story, as I call it. Michelle did mention we've known each other for a while, and you know, I like to get things done quickly, and I understand that that's not doesn't happen too often. And by my age, I would think I would have learned patience, but I haven't. So I wanted to give you an overview of kind of when I was first introduced to the idea of COB Smart through the implementation, because if others are experiencing some of the challenges to get approval, or, you know, just to get people to buy in to COB Smart. I just wanted to share kind of my experience so that maybe you don't feel so bad. You might be a lot better off than other folks. So back in, let's see, back in 2013, I believe, when I was with the continuous improvement team in my organization, we had within our state, we have an Office of Health Insurance Commissioner who created a task force to simplify the administration of health insurance. They had a strong focus on the problems that providers were experiencing. And not surprisingly, coordination of benefits came, I think that was one of the 3 or 4 items that they decided to focus on based on the provider feedback. I went to one meeting. I wasn't part of that task force, but I got called into one meeting because the topic was about COB Smart, and somebody from CAQH was there. I don't know who, but they were talking to us about this idea of sharing eligibility files with each other so that we could identify coordination of benefits and determine who's primary. I was really excited about that because, you know, I think we've always, in my organization, at least from my experience, the way that we looked at coordination of benefits it was much different. My perspective was it was a program. There were a lot of aspects to it, and a lot of other people really just thought of it as, you know, we get money from it and we send out these paper surveys that nobody likes. So that was really the extent of it. People didn't really understand it, but they all had opinions. And when I heard about this idea, I was just thinking it was great, right? Because if you think about it, you want to pay claims the right way the first time. We're all in insurance companies. You know, we process members' claims. There's a lot of pieces to that, but none of us want to go back and forth with adjusting claims or you know, researching things, delaying provider payments, things like that, and impacting our members because, you know, the members get caught in this as well. So I thought it was a great idea. I shared it with the folks in charge at that time because it was right before I took over responsibility, and they said no. Their thought process was that they were concerned with sharing our eligibility data with competitors at that time. So we actually, I wasn't able to explore it any further. I wasn't in the position to. So back in 2014, when I took over COB Smart, we were inundated with audits and a lot of other activities. So I was working on those audit findings as well as other process gaps that I had identified and was working on fixing. In 2016, several team members, not my immediate team, but several team members had gone to probably a Blues national conference, and they came back to me with decks that they'd sat through presentations, and I think some of them must have given my my business card or my phone number to somebody at CAQH. But they talked about this great opportunity, and they thought it would be something that, you know, I would be interested in, and that would be good for our company. So in 2017, I connected with Michelle. I attended one of these webinars, as a matter of fact. And then after that, Michelle and I had multiple conversations, much more in depth than this webinar. But we had some serious conversations, and I was actually really excited about it. I thought it was something that we definitely needed to do. I talked to my leadership about it. They seemed interested, but they wanted more information. At that time, this was in mid-2017, I actually went on maternity leave. So our progress with Michelle, she was very patient, but it stalled for quite a while, right? So I was out for a while. I came back. I had a few things to handle. A year later, we connected again. I got leadership buy-in. I'll get into the details of that in a few slides. I was able to get leadership buy-in. We brought CAQH in, and by 2018, our contracts, our NDAs, all of that stuff was signed. Everything was in place. We kicked off our implementation, and 4 months later, we implemented. I did throw on this slide as well. We'll talk about the savings, of course, but I wanted to just say it took us probably 6 to 7 months before we were able to get the reporting that we really wanted. And I'll talk through, you'll hear some of the challenges that we faced along the way in life, because to me that takes that's too long. It shouldn't have taken that long. But we'll talk a little bit about what we encountered along the way. All right, next slide, please, Maggie. Thank you. So I wanted to explain a little bit about our structure, right? So every plan, I'm sure, has a variation of how they're set up. And I wanted to explain this because this does come up as one of the challenges you'll see in the next slide. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island, we have oversight responsibility of coordination of benefits. We set the strategy, we monitor, when we want to contract with vendors, we're the ones who own those relationships. We set our targets and expectations. And we also, we identify COB improvements, right? So I do want to call out, and I'm sorry I didn't say this first, this was really pre-COB SMART. Later on in the presentation, I'm going to show the same slide with some additional information and changes that I'll highlight and call out so that you can see how we've used this and how we actually changed it. So while Blue Cross maintains oversight, we actually have a strategic partner that performs our operational activities. So there was a decisions made years ago, many years ago, before I took over COB. This is one of the functions that we outsource, and we have, and I say strategic partnership because that's really what it is. We've worked extremely closely with the folks in this organization, and we don't treat each other like vendor clients, at least from my perspective. But they're responsible for the day-to-day operations, right? So we maintain oversight responsibility, making sure that they're hitting, timeliness, accuracy is good, they're achieving the targets that we expect, things like that. But they manage the people. They have the people, they manage the people. They use all of the data that comes into them, right? And we basically would drive them to, we'll ensure that they're using all of the data sources. So obviously they would work with member inquiries, provider inquiries. They would also, we'd ensure that, they're utilizing, I say all the CMS files because I'm sure there are a lot of different CMS files that come in. So those are just a few of the sources that they would use. We would also, the structure where I find was a little bit of a challenge. It was set up where we would pay our partner an administrative fee. So it wasn't set up where we would pay for performance, right? And I understand that because I think the thought was this is transactional work. However, all of you with experience with COB, I think you would agree that it's more than just transactional work. There is that aspect to it, but there's a lot of other pieces and components that come together, pay for performance, right? And I understand that because that aspect. And on top of that, we actually also, we implemented, and we've had third-party vendors in the past in coordination of benefits. So the way that it works today, pre-COB SMART, is we had a vendor just doing data mining activities. So they were identifying coordination of benefit information. They were identifying primacy in some cases and sending us claims that we would have overpaid. So that was in place as well. And it still is, and I'll talk about that. But the challenge with that, and from my perspective, is, we pay that vendor a contingency fee. So it's great. The more money they find, the better for us. We're also paying out a portion of that to them. And we already have an operational partner who's getting a certain admin rate regardless of how much they achieve. So, that was one of the struggles I had with, this is the structure we were given, and we had to work within this. So this kind of thing supports some of the challenges that we had and things that we've had to overcome and find some creative ways to overcome that. Maggie, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. All right. So basically, we had a huge push, and we still do, right? We want to decrease medical expense. Everybody does it. We don't want to spend too much money. We want to try to make healthcare affordable for people. So we've been focusing for many years on initiatives that can reduce medical expense. I put in here one of my objectives was always paying claims right the first time. So in combination, right, you don't want to spend money on claims that you don't need to. You want to pay claims right the first time because it keeps people happy, and it's a smoother process, right? You don't have to rework any of the claims that you've processed, et cetera. Some of the challenges we had with our COB program, I touched upon a couple, but we relied on our members providing us info. So we were sending out an annual COB survey, right? We actually would send out up to 3 a year. If the members didn't respond, we would send a second and then a third. We had a lot of pushback from internal teams complaining themselves, employees actually complaining about getting them, and member complaints about receiving surveys. They didn't feel like they should have to answer questions. I don't want to go into it. Again, I'm sure if you guys ever did surveys, you've heard similar information. So we had a lot of pressure in that respect, right? And it's not easy to make a COB survey short because we got that. Can't you just shorten the survey? And why do you ask so many questions? And can't you just leave the members alone? Which was interesting because some of the employer groups wanted us to not bother the members, but they wanted us to save more money. We also had a lack of leadership support from a resource perspective. So at the time that I took over responsibility of coordination of benefits, we actually had a lot of leadership change. So we got some new folks in, so they had different perspectives, right? So the people before who were didn't want to think more about COB Smart, they had retired. So we had some different folks in there that were willing to look at different opportunities. But given that we're trying to reduce medical expense, there's a pressure at administrative expenses, right? You're balancing your MLRs. It was very challenging for us to get support from leadership to give us resources. By resources, I mean, money, prioritizing our initiatives over others, as well as even the analytical capabilities, right? And that leads to one of the other challenges I have on here is insufficient reporting. So a couple things with this. We didn't have detailed data on our performance. So we knew, hey, this is how much we achieved, $10 million in savings for this time period, or savings and recoveries. But we didn't know why. So one year we actually had, we had an average amount that we would recover every month. And one month in particular, it tripled, which is great, but we had no insight whatsoever into why that happened. So if we were doing something right, we couldn't even capitalize on that to continue doing it right. So that had me nervous. And at the same time, you can't really manage a program well where your goal is to, save money when you don't really have insight into the money. So that was one of the pieces. The other challenge with this was we didn't have resources to do data analysis for us. If we identified opportunities, we didn't have anyone to really dig in and help us assess what value is this opportunity? Is there a value? And why that was such a challenge is, making a proposal to leadership, which I think once or twice a year I was asked by my leaders to present to senior leaders. And I did. And I could reuse the same slide almost every year and update some numbers because every year they were like, wow, there's a lot of great things here, but we're not, they didn't want to pursue any of them. One of the challenges I had was trying to calculate an ROI, right? So how much is this going to cost us and how much, are we going to get from it? That was a challenge, especially with the lack of analytical resources to help us figure that out. In addition to that, we get a lot of pressure to provide benchmarks. So how well are we doing versus other plans? Honestly, I think in 10 years, I still don't have very good benchmarks. But what we were able to find for a while is we had being a Blue plan, we had access to Blue system, I think Blue Health Intelligence. But we had the ability to pull some benchmarks. And when we were able to pull or get somebody to pull the data for us, we found some opportunities related to the claims that we were paying as secondary compared to other plans. Our members, we might have had the information identified, information meaning coordination of benefits, but we didn't have we weren't doing as comparable on the claim side of it. So, and that's where the money comes in. But besides those benchmarks, we didn't have anything else. So it was a hard sell, and I can understand that. But nobody really wanted to kind of take that risk. All right, next slide, Maggie. So why COB Smart? Besides some of the other things I already mentioned, right? I talked about our challenges and the pressure to save medical expense. What we also received a lot of pressure from self-funded accounts. I touched upon this a little bit, but our self-funded accounts, they have a lot of pull with us, especially because everybody says they pay their own claims expense. I totally understand that. I mean, but from my perspective, I think fully insured, self-insured, it's all similar because a lot of fully insured groups are also, paying some of their claims expense, right? So they're big enough. What they spend in claims every year is going to get fed into their rate. So my perspective was a little bit different than a lot of people, but they get a lot of attention in my organization. A lot of those accounts also have consultants. So it seemed to be a huge theme for a couple of years where the employer groups were contacting our organization and the consultants, and everybody wanted to know why we weren't doing better with COB. And which was interesting, right? Because I had my personal, I shared what I felt. I felt we could do better, but I wasn't sure how they knew that we could do better or we weren't doing good enough. And I can understand this, but the sales team didn't want to have me speak to the groups. I was actually really interested in what are they measuring against? Right? Do they have benchmarks? Because I'm looking for those things. So that didn't really go over very well. But so we were trying to address that, but it was a challenge. So I mentioned we didn't have very good reporting, so we couldn't even produce very detailed reports to say, hey, look, this is what we're doing for your account. We couldn't give them that information. So that was a challenge for us. That model that I talked about before, where we have a third-party vendor who does data mining for us, because we pay the contingency fee, we weren't offering it to our self-insured group. And I'll talk about that at the end, but we weren't offering it to them. So here we are. It's enhanced from our perspective. It was enhanced coordination of benefits, right? They're mining the data for us. And at that point, and that was great, but we didn't want to eat the cost of doing it for our self-funded account. So really, what else are we going to do? What improvements are we going to put in place, right? That was part of the administrative expense these groups were paying us because we owed it to them, right? It was our responsibility. We're managing the claims for them. We're processing them. Coordination of benefits is part of claims processing, in our opinion. So we felt that we needed to do a better job at that for those self-insured accounts as well. As I mentioned before, we relied heavily on member-reported information. We didn't tell members upon annual enrollment, or the employer group didn't share the information, but we didn't remind them, we need this information. We piloted something with the call center where they would ask members when they called in. That lasted a month. We couldn't get that word out, and getting pressure internally from sending out paper surveys and everything else, it was just, and we know how effective, right, the surveys are. I mean, we actually had a pretty good response rate. I think we're about 16 to 17% response rate, which is good. But out of that, 5%, I think it was up to 5% of the 17% actually had information, the other coverage. So a lot of what we received back were, no, I don't have anything. So then we're wasting our administrative resources processing surveys that have no value to us whatsoever. So that was one of the things, right? All of these things together, and even in my opinion of COB Smart and sharing eligibility data made sense. So that was really my perspective. And what do we have to lose, right? So I think it's on the next slide. Maggie, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so I have this on here. So I mentioned before we had leadership change. I was able to share some information with my manager about COB Smart, and I put together, with the help of Michelle, I put together some of the benefits that we could achieve. I used our own data as well as data that Michelle was able to share based on other plans' experience. I also used, I think she showed a slide called adoption. I used something like that specific to plans to show, here's who's using COB Smart today. I actually pulled our COB data, what we had in our system, and I compared, I looked at the distribution of what carriers our members had other coverage with. Understanding that we didn't know everything at that time, but it gave us a sense for how many of our members today have other coverage with a plan that participates in COB Smart. And it was a high number. I mean, I think if you take federal Medicare out of the picture, it was a very high number for us. Knowing that we probably would never get the federal Medicare information directly, it felt like it was the right thing to do. What I did was I just gave you guys an image to the right of the slide. I went to a training, I think it was called pyramid training. And through that, they were pushing this in my organization at the time. They wanted us to start using, when we talk to management, a one-page slide, right? So that's what I showed you guys. So that's how I started off my presentation to the senior leader. Basically, it's like, here's the situation. So what? And then the recommendation. So really, in the end, what happened was I looked at what's the cost of sending out the paper surveys, what's the cost of participating in COB Smart. It was less money to participate in COB Smart, right? It was a two-year commitment, and for that commitment, you know, we were actually gonna save an administrative expense for those 2 years. So to me, given what and the estimates I put together, given what I thought we could save in admin, as well.
Sorry, it sounds like we're getting a little feedback maybe from Michelle. If you don't mind muting, sorry.
Thank you.
Carrie, I just wanted to give you a heads up on time because I know you have a
okay.
couple, yeah, okay.
Thanks, Michelle. So basically, we figured the administrative expense that we were going to save over 2 years was worth it. We're going to improve the experience, both from our members, other folks as well, just not sending the survey, being able to get information directly from other plans, which would be more complete and accurate. And I did an estimation about how much I thought we were going to save. So using some of the data that CAQH was able to share with us, if we were at, say, 3% of our members had other coverage, it was higher than that. But if 3% had other coverage or other coverage primary, you know, and we thought we could get to just say 5% based on the data that was shared with us. I actually brought that down a little bit because I wanted to be very careful in the estimates that I was providing to leadership because they told me to it, which is good, but I didn't want to overestimate. So I knocked that down, and then I applied, I took that percent of members, calculated the actual number of members, and applied that to the average savings we achieved annually for members that had other coverage. And that's basically what happened. They felt like it was worth the risk of trying something new. We're going to save admin, and we're going to hopefully achieve great benefits from a claims expense perspective. All right, next slide, please. So the implementation, I want to just say that I think I've worked on a lot of projects and different vendor implementations, and this one was, say, my favorite. It went very well. We have a lot of challenges sometimes getting the stuff done, but CAQH came to the table. They had the expertise of doing this over and over again with other plans. They assigned a project manager for us who helped us navigate through the whole implementation. There are a lot of different folks jumping in to those meetings and the work groups that we had along the way with the different types of expertise, right? When we were talking about eligibility files, we had one person. If we need, info security, we had somebody else come on. And the PM kept us honest and on track. So for us, implementing in a 4-month period, in my perspective, I didn't think we were going to do it. I actually thought that was kind of funny when they said 3 to 4 months, but we were able to do it. So I was really excited about that. And it was a combination of the CAQH folks and Blue Cross resources. So the way that we were able to do it at Blue Cross, we were able to sneak it through under a pool of money that we have to fix things. It wasn't an official project, which had its pros and cons. We didn't have as much money, but we were able to get it done quickly. But we had so I took the lead on the COB side from a subject matter expertise perspective, and we had a tech lead who had experience with eligibility files and who knew the process and all those gates to go through when you're sharing and receiving data. There's just, and I'm not really strong on the technical side, but she was, and it helped. She knew all the approvals we needed to get, the dates we needed to hit. So that was, I think that setup and having those resources was huge for our team. The other piece was the process itself. I talked a little bit about the project plan that we had to manage this too. Our team spent a great deal of time on the eligibility files. I believe Morgan, and I'm sure Chaz, both CAQH, told us, like, this is important, right? You want to get the eligibility files correct. We spent quite a bit of time on that, and it was worth it because I think that we've seen that in the results. We don't have the issues that I was afraid of because eligibility can be tricky. So that was huge for us. Also the testing, CAQH employed a phased testing approach. So you tested, I think it was 3 phases, and we tested different things each phase, which was good. And on top of that, we also came up with, here's the other things we really want to look at in detail. So we came up with our own test scenarios, test cases, and we analyzed the data that we sent out, the reports we received back, and the errors. So part of phase 3 reporting, I think, it was our actual data. So we were able to look at our actual data, even though we were still in test, and kind of clean up some of the things that we found. So I thought that was a great process and way to handle the implementation. Next slide, please. Okay, challenges. So every implementation has some challenges. I think my biggest challenge was the pain I felt in trying to get through all of the red tape in my own organization. I understand when you're sharing member information, you want to be extremely careful. But I think part of it was a process internally. We have different systems you have to log into and create requests in, and it has to go through 5 or 6 different teams. It could be different now. This was 2 years ago. But it has to go through a lot of teams, and there's no transparency to the process. So I wasn't sure who was going to do what when, and I was under pressure to get all of this stuff done. And that was all before the contract got signed. So like it was all happening at the same time. So that was one of my biggest problems. And I put that in internal process, but the info security process kind of falls into that, and the document approvals, because we didn't want to sign certain documents like contracts if our info security team wasn't going to agree that we could share this data with CAQH. So that was like the biggest challenge in this process. Lessons learned. One of the things that I think and that we did is you can split your eligibility files into different groups, or what they call reporting entities. We're out of Rhode Island. Rhode Island's not a big state, so we're not a gigantic plan. We chose to just split our files into 2. And the reason is we're very careful with employee data. So we have limited access internally to employee data, and we're very careful in the reports that we get back, things like that. So we actually split that. And then that way we were able to manage both when people go into the portal from our company, as well as the reports that we receive back. We've been able to limit who has access to the employee files. So that was a really a really good decision we made with help and suggestions from CAQH about different ways plans break up the data into reporting entities. When you report we only send over medical and drug information to CAQH. We actually just give medical records, but we decided to put RX indication, RX coverage on the same line as medical. And I think that made sense at the time, but in hindsight, when we get the COB report back, what happens is if the primacy has been determined, you get an indicator of a 4 on medical. That's what we're getting. But on RX, it's coming up as a 1, which means it may be something, may not be. So that was just a challenge for us. We're aware of it. But a lot of times, those folks that have the medical record and COB has been determined, the drug coverage that they have is also with the same organization and the same primacy rule. It's just not flagged as a top priority for us. So we've had to work around that. So I just wanted to give you a snapshot. We were told many times that our first eligibility file will be, our first COB Smart report will be huge. So as you can see, we sent about 730,000 records over in our first file, and we opted for the 18-month historical data. We don't go back. We figured we didn't want to go 2 years based on, we don't go back 2 years and pull that claims experience. And we were pulling in, at least with the 18 months, everybody who had been active with us over the last year and a half. So we felt that was the best approach. With our reports, as you can see, week 1, we had a ton of classification 4s and 3s, right? And I don't know the level of experience you guys have with this, but the 4s are like the best, right? This is where primacy's been determined. So this was huge for us. So this was a great thing, but at the same time, we needed to have a great plan to work those records and capitalize on them. I also just threw some things on the errors. Our errors actually, I felt, were very low, and the errors that we get were not problem errors. They were errors, but it had to do with data we were receiving from our employer group. And that's how we have to load it in our system. And because of that, it was causing an issue, but it was not an issue that was affecting the COB report data. All right, some of the post-implementation challenges, working the report. So I think we've done okay, but it's been a long process, and we still have some ways to go. But we took that 12,000 number, and we're able to give a 4-month plan to work through those records. But at the same time, you're getting changes. So that was the piece that we had to incorporate. Okay, this is what we're going to work, but we're getting, changes every week. So we had to find ways to incorporate that. We did focus on the 4s as well at the beginning, because we wanted to make sure, we were getting to the top priority ones. We had a lack of resources. So because we were able to get the eligibility files created and set this process up, I wasn't able to get the resources needed to develop a tool to take those reports in, prioritize them internally, bounce them up against our claims data. We weren't able to do that systematically. So they had to do that manually.
I just want to make one note. This was prior to data validation. So I know
Correct.
You adopted, you just adopted that. So, and you're not quite live yet. So that's going to change.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that was the validation of the other plan's eligibility. The other thing was, I think some of our team members weren't utilizing the portal necessarily to the best of, the portal's got some great information, and you've got that ability to outreach the plan. And the team wasn't doing that. They were relying on certain people to make outreach calls when they had this tool right at their fingertips. So there's been some training along the way. Next slide, please. I think, Michelle, it's on the next slide talking about benefits. Well, this is important. So as I mentioned, we're a small plan. We were able to achieve $3.4 million in claims expense over 16 months, but I wanted to put in context for you. That's a 37-to-1 ROI. So based on what it cost us for COB Smart, that's how much we were able to to benefit from it. So it's significant. I mean, it's very clear now it was a no-brainer, right? We actually were able to decrease our administrative expense by 35%, going from the paper survey to COB Smart. So we turned off the paper surveys, we pay for COB Smart for this functionality in the tool, and we save 35% annually. In addition to that, we actually, because our claims, our COB data mining vendor gets a contingency payment, and we make them wait a couple months before they can action any claims, we were able to decrease what we pay them by 40% without losing any savings. So that's significant for us, right? So that saves us quite a bit of money. We're not paying the vendor, we're still realizing it, but we're realizing it through the use of the COB Smart reports. Post-production improvement. Just jumping to the second bullet, right? This is what Michelle, this is what you were mentioning. We're in the process of finalizing the data validation tool. So I think this is going to be significant for us, and it's going to allow us potentially to get to that fourth bullet that I have here, which is auto-loading some of the COB records from the weekly report. So we utilize Facet system for our claims processing and COB information, and that's something that's always interested me, especially learning what other plans are doing with this data. And that's something that, you know, we want to get to. So having this validation and being able to implement that soon, excuse me, and work through that, get comfortable with it, is going to lead us, I believe, to the auto loading of some COB information, which frees up resources to do other activities. We're also working on, I just mentioned this a little while ago, using the COB Smart portal better, right? So the information's there, there's a lot of functionality, we need to capitalize on that. And we did just go through training recently on that workflow tool where we can send inquiries to other plans. So I think that's going to be great for us. And we have to implement a lag in the COB of Smart report. So we get a report in, we actually use reports from 3 or 4 weeks, and we pull the data together to make sure we can take out any records that have changed along the way and use the most current information. We had to do that just because of the sheer volume that we had initially, and we found at first, once we started updating things, that we got something later that changed it. So that lag helped us not have to keep touching the same member. See, I know you guys are going to get this deck, so I already highlighted the information on here, like the changes, right? Specific to what we look like after the COB Smart tool and tools have been implemented. The benefit, I'm just jumping to the bottom, right? So COB Smart is part of the benefit that we're realizing from COB Smart is getting passed on to our self-funded account. We're not charging them anything different than we were before using it, but they're getting the benefit. So we're not having to rely as much on our vendor to do that. And the self-funded accounts who don't want to pay for the vendor that we use are still getting benefits of a better COB program. And you guys can read the other things as well on here, our reporting enhancements. One of the things I wanted to pull out is our partner has really come through with creating a tool to bring together all COB information. So they're using the COB Smart report, they're using claims data, the information we have on files, they're using data from the files we get from CMS, other information. They're pulling it all together and prioritizing the work for the COB team. Part of the reason for them putting the resources into developing this tool is we changed the model a little bit with them. So instead of just paying an administrative fee, we're developing a shared model with them to say, hey, look, like if you can bring all of these ideas to the table and help support with the analytics, we're going to give you some of the savings back, and it's less than what we pay our third-party vendor. So I think that's a great thing, and I wanted to call that out. All right, next slide. I think this is the last. That was the last one. Oh, just to summarize this, working with CAQH was just, it was a good experience for me, and it still is. But they had people, their folks know, they know the data, they know the process, they know where plans fall down and what plans have done to succeed. right along the way, if we've had questions or issues, they're available for us. So I just wanted to call that out because I know when you're deciding whether or not to work with somebody, that's a huge piece of, you know, what you're thinking about. Like, are they just going to sell this to us and then they're not as hands-on? They definitely were, and that was a very good experience. So I know there's not a lot of time, and I'm sorry that it took me a little bit longer than I thought.
Carrie, I have two questions that have come up. I guess the first one is, did you meet, you know, your forecasted objectives from the business case, right? Reducing that medical spend, yep. Improving those members. Okay.
Yeah, we definitely did. We did on the admin side because I put both an admin target in as well as a medical expense target. So we surpassed the medical expense target. I think it was half of what we stated. I'm sorry. I think we stated half of what we achieved, right? So I think it was double. And we achieved the admin savings as well.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, 37-1 it is really exciting, you know, for your plan. I guess the other question was, you know, did you talk to other COB Smart clients, you know, to kind of help your business case?
Yeah, we did. I actually, my plan, and for the leaders to buy in, I forgot about that point. Being a Blues plan, they like to always hear what other Blues plans are doing. So we were able to connect directly through the help of Michelle with two Blues plans. One that was somebody who had been using COB Smart for a while, and one was a plan that had just recently implemented with them. We asked them a standard set of questions. One of them was about the support that CAQH would provide. One was about lessons learned, like what did you do, and what can we learn from you? And that really that was a huge point for our leadership. It's like, all right, other plans are using it. This is what they've had to say. So that was very helpful in getting leadership buy-in.
Okay, I have one more. How many staff members work the return files from CAQH?
That's actually something I'm not aware of. So because it's our partner, I don't know the staff they have on that.
Okay, that's going to change. You know, what we do see with data validation is folks auto loading about 20% on average.
Yep.
You know, overlaps that come in. So this is going to get better also. Any other questions from folks?
There was one question, Michelle, from Lynn. She asked how many insurance companies contribute to the COB Smart database. There is a link that I sent over, Lynn, to the CAQH.org website. We list about half of the plans that are participating on the website. We don't have permission from the plans to list their names on our website. So Michelle or I can send you the full list after the webinar.
Yeah, we've got about 45 health plans and our first state. So it's very exciting. Any other questions? Okay, we are right at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Carrie, for bringing your experience.
One more question.
Oh, sorry.
Carrie, did you use the CAQH ROI calculator to set goals?
No, I did not. I don't know if I was familiar with that. Okay,
yeah, that wasn't around when Carrie was her evaluation. So Carrie went live in the spring of 2019. So, you know, we had contracts signed in 2018.
Yes, and Cheryl's the one who asked that question. And Cheryl, either Michelle or I can kind of circle back with you about our ROI calculator. Sorry about that.
Right. We were able, you know, Carrie brought to the table her claims, administrative, and vendor savings, contributing to that 37-1, you know, return. So very exciting stuff. Okay. If there's no more questions, thank you all for joining today. We're going to continue our webinar series, especially since JJ and I can't get on a plane and come to you guys. But thanks so much for your attendance, and feel free to reach out with questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.